think I'm excited to have you here and really grateful to share with us because, yeah, I think as your current role as head of community in Ecovilla San Mateo, eco village that's going to be built, and your past experience of work with decentralized teams, you have a deep understanding, I think, of how people cooperate and work together. Hey, Gabriel. Um, and so, yeah, for me, I don't know, just to cut through all the layers, I see a lot of people building projects where the physical stuff is getting built and very little thought to the invisible structures, the cohesion, etc. It could be from a community to an event to any kind of project. So, yeah, I just wanted to chat with you because you have a rich experience in it, not even your background knowledge, but your current experience of, yeah, just kind of what are some of the, oh, there's Yaler, what are some of the fundamental kind of things that you see that are important, needed, being addressed, missing in, yeah, in land projects or not, in getting groups to work together and cohese?
And cohes and cohere.
Cohere.
Uh,
With you.
sure. So I guess I can share like just broadly maybe how we're thinking about this at ESM.
Sure.
Um, and it kind of gets to the point that you were saying of like I think a lot of people, including maybe this project to some degree when it started, was sort of like, if you build it, they will come. And that's like yeah, that's the problem. You build it and they come,
Mhm.
and then everyone shows up with all of their various different ideas and projections of what community means. And oftentimes what you have to sort that out is, the legal bylaws, which, in Costa Rica, essentially, as far as I can tell from my research, like you have an assembly meeting once a year. And so, the actual bylaws required to create a condominium, which is how many of these projects are done,
Mhm.
uh, really don't say anything to the key questions that all communities have, which are how are we actually going to make decisions and who gets to make those decisions?
Right.
And how are we going to resolve conflicts? Um, and what are the actual processes that we're going to go through? And what we are designing here is basically kind of like what is the minimum viable structure, knowing that whatever we make, it won't be right, but at least it's a starting place and everyone, has the same ground to say, okay, when we're in a conflict, like this is how we do it.
Yeah.
Um, and we kind of have a really simple sort of almost kind of flowchart system of like, here's, if you're in a conflict, like there's personal reflection you can do. There's like, various kinds of mediation you can do with other parties. And then there's various sort of like, committee circles sort of that you can also go to. And that sort of is like a escalation process. Um, but yeah, and the same with decision making. I'm kind of in the thick of that right now, but really trying to see like what is the simplest while still being effective and fair? And then how can you atomize decision making? So, the way we've done it here at ESM is essentially this community is made up of 6 different neighborhoods, each with about 50 lots. And so that's going to be sort of like where a lot of the decision making happens. And there's very little decision making that happens or affects the entire community. We're really trying to minimize that thing where you need 280 votes. And instead really looking at like, how do you get it down to those 50 people in their lots? And what affects them, So it's sort of like borrowing some of that, like how local can you get for decision making?
Yeah.
Um,
By the way, just to double click there for a sec, because that was a lot of like useful info.
yeah,
What's up to everyone who joined a little later? Zach, so yeah, that's decision making on a hyper local level, like per barrio, per neighborhood, decision making as a community. You also mentioned, kind of the condo bylaws and the governing structures. And so yeah, you have to go through all of the layers of decision making so that a project, an eco village, land project, community, um, it can move forward. One, logistically, like there's a lot of stuff that has to move forward, permits and things, and also ethically that things feel good and are done in kind of the most, I don't know, latest best thinking, current best thinking of like conscious decision making. So that seems to one also always be a challenge, like hear people's voices and listen, and also make sure decisions are made and progress can move forward, right?
Yeah, we based everything, both the conflict navigation and the decision making on these, they're called like the culture design principles for community culture.
Mhm.
And I guess we'll talk a little bit more about that really the answer to a lot of this stuff about how to do invisible infrastructure, it's really how do you consciously design community.
Mhm.
Um, I always say like if people are in a conflict and they're kind of reading the bylaws and interpreting, this says 7 days after it, it's like you've already lost, right? It's like if you're trying to build community and people are deliberating over various wording, and it's like, okay, we've lost the plot here. Um, but one of those, the first principle is like, interdependence and sovereignty, for example. And so all of them are sort of these polarities that we're trying to invite people into like having more of a both and approach to, instead of saying like, well, I just want to be me in my own lot, like, but also we're connected to everybody in the community, and like both these things are true. And how are we creating systems that can sort of honor both of those? And so um, yeah, in taking these sort of like a both and approach and then trying to create decision making on top of it, for example, like how do you create a system, like you were saying, that hears everybody's voice and is inclusive, but is also efficient? That's one of the principles, is like inclusivity and efficiency. Obviously, the most inclusive thing is sitting in a big circle and hearing everyone's opinion and talking everything out till everyone's got 100% buy-in. But like, no thanks.
Yeah.
So like how do you balance? And of course, like the most efficient way is just having one autocratic person who just makes the decision and you go. So it's like how are we sort of incorporating the most efficient and most inclusive process possible? And one way we're going to try to do that is we've based all of our decision making on consent versus consensus. So we don't need everyone to agree. We just need no one to block it. And we kind of base everything on this fist of five model that we have borrowed from the Quakers.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's like a really elegant, I found, decision-making system where, for example, like right now, if I was like, hey, what do you think? Like, should we extend this call by another extra hour? And everyone just quick puts up a vote, and it's like, I hate this idea, but I'm not going to block it. Or
Yeah.
like, I love this idea. Yeah, definitely. Or just like, no, I can't let this go forward. And so I've found, even we had a gathering of like 150 neighbors here,
Mhm.
and you could actually make decisions pretty quick because you don't really need to know everyone's opinion. You just need to know sort of where they at on the spectrum. And if I'm proposing something and I look out on a sea of ones, I'm probably going to reconsider that proposal, even though no one's blocking it. Or I have so much conviction and I'm so confident in it, then I can take it forward and live with the accountability and consequences. That's another beauty of the Fist of Five, is that there's always a proposer. And so there's not a like we should, or a committee will form. It's like no, it's someone proposing it, and so there's like a built-in sort of accountability layer to things that do or don't happen.
Yeah, and Zach, you're dealing with the level of complexity that's quite large just in the terms of the amount of people in total who are part of this project. And you're also in a bioregion of multiple projects where you all play volleyball together. I figured out the secret of community on this call with Zach. Um, but how do you, I guess two questions is, all of what you're doing is set up to work in those layers of complexity. The one thing that I think is fundamental is, and this came up on a call recently with somebody in Brazil, that she was like, hey, so we have our principles, okay, we have our values, we have our direction. We have a hard time getting congruency, one, let alone among the leadership of the
Mhm.
project, because that's a group, okay, of people and stakeholders like your team. And then the people who buy land in these projects, they either have come with that same understanding of values or might not. And so, yeah, how does that come in of communicating like all of these things across the different stakeholder groups?
Um, I mean, the only answer, the honest answer is we'll see. You know, we currently, myself, my wife, and my kid are the first residents here. So I don't want to be like spouting anything because, like, who knows? I can tell you that we have a wide diversity of neighbors that are coming. We have a wide diversity of what people's expectations and projections are onto what community is or what eco is. You know, all these things, it's going to be quite a gumbo of different values and perceptions. Um, and you know, that's why again, I feel like what I hope is that we've created, we'll have structures both from conflict navigation and decision making that allow us sort of like, you know, a polyculture of like many different solutions to bloom. That we don't need full alignment, but that we rather can get into a system of like, you know, let's try this. And maybe one group can try this and another group can try that. Um, and so, you know, I don't know how this is all going to work. And I hope that because we have these six different neighborhoods that are all kind of organized around a common area, and then we have our larger common commercial area, um, but there'll be more room for experimentation. And that's why we've really tried to reduce, like really the only thing the whole community votes on is the annual budget. And after that, like or like actually amending the bylaws.
Okay.
Um, but other than that, there really isn't anything that's going to require full community vote, um, especially not like consistently. And so, you know, hopefully there won't be a need to have like, you know, full values alignment on everything. Obviously, you need a certain amount of coherence, and we've done a fair amount of work in that. You know, identifying sort of what are some of the core values we want to operate by. Um, yeah, it's my feeling though that a lot of times it's easier to identify principles and try things and sort of
Yeah.
uncover your values and your purpose more than like put them on a wall and define them. Um,
Yeah. I
because
appreciate
that's not how it works.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Zach. That's a rather unique perspective and to me an important one because um, one is, these are the first projects of its kind, maybe since like the early predecessors of like Findhorn and Oroville and these like legendary communities down here. But in terms of both Costa Rica and I think now, these are prototypes, and to come in with humility, I don't know, we're going to try, we're going to learn, is much better than, for me, is much better than, oh, yep, this is how it works. We've studied the best laws in the world of community. No, we don't effing know. And so it's important to say, and we'll figure it out. And there's also like a stress off the shoulders because it is prototyping together, you know. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, that I guess that leads to kind of like the second layer of the question, which is, and this is even in your past experiences that I've seen you with in different groups and coordinate and everything, which is now you have a larger group of people at the end, who are doing this thing. Let's say it's built and delivered by the development group, and people are happy. Some things are fixed. Okay, again, I'm like rarely ever like disappointed in physical infrastructure and projects. I think it's always as eco-conscious and as beautiful as it can be. People have a good heart. Um, but then comes down to this group of people living together, 100, later more. What kind of, because you mentioned it before the fist of five and the consent, was it consent? How was it?
Consent-based versus consensus-based. Uh-huh.
Consent based. What else do you think is important and practical for larger or smaller groups to actually cohere, not so much on decision making, like governance and whatever, but cohere as humans? Really figure out, because I've seen different, you've been around too. I've seen a lot of these projects and very cool, but you don't feel sometimes the vibe, or half of the community is rented out, or it doesn't matter. It's not to point fingers, it's just realities that happen. Um, I sometimes see conflict happen between families or people, and it's usually resolved pretty quickly. I've never seen like a fist fight on the streets of an eco village, but I have seen people really like getting down and dirty about certain things, animals. I don't know why it always comes up, but pets, whatever. So, what are you going in with now ahead of time with humility, but resource wise for that? You know?
Yeah, I was shocked to find out that pets are the number one cause of conflict in communities. I can only assume it's because they become like a vessel for lots of other conflict. Like it becomes about the pet, but it's not about the pet. But that's kind of the number one. So a lot of like, again, with the principles that we have that we've operated with, that we sort of developed, and with the whole like naming it conflict navigation versus conflict resolution. And really like the messaging to me, I think if I'm paraphrasing a lot of what we said is it's like if you're not interested really in like self-awareness and growing as a person, then like community probably isn't worth the pain.
Hmm,
So
wow.
it's like I feel like I don't know if I reflect like on a marriage, for example, and like if I went into my marriage saying like, how can this make me happier? Like at some point, I'm gonna this is not making me happy. Like this is too much work, and then I'm gonna bail on it. Um, but if I have some larger purpose, that's so funny. My wife and child have just joined.
Hey, what's up, Nia? What's up, buddy?
Your ears must have been burning.
Hey, AJ, how are you, darling? What's up?
Uh, but so if you're looking to join a community and saying like, what can I get out of this? Like, yes, and where am I looking to grow? Like, do I really want to see my blind spots? And do I really want to expand beyond those? Because at some point I'm going to be angry about someone's dog, and I'm going to have to really recognize that that's like my relationship around control and with my father
Yeah,
or something like this. And I think we've all probably had an experience in your life when you're in a conflict with somebody and they think it's about one thing and it's really about this blind spot that they have around scarcity or whatever it is. And unless people are to some degree willing to go there, and unless we're providing them tools and spaces where they can safely sort of explore that, then I think it's really hard to get that deep sort of connection and coherence over time in a community. It's no accident that the ones that you mentioned all have like to varying degrees, but there is a sort of spiritual and component and a sort of, I mean, you could say dogma, like a way of seeing the world, and there's an orienting purpose that's bigger than itself. And actually, one of our neighbors here, Charles Eisenstein, has some beautiful pieces on this, talking about if you're trying to do community for community's sake, then like it won't work, right? Community is something that happens in the pursuit of some higher purpose where we actually need each other to do it. And so, he sort of, again, I'm paraphrasing his much more eloquent words, but he sort of says like, the definition of community is people who actually need each other. Um, and so for us at ESM right now, what we're working, like part of the work is this slow sort of exploration and almost like excavation of our purpose. It's not something that we sort of define. It's something that we sort of together kind of uncover and
Beautiful.
understand over time.
Yeah, beautiful, Zach. I love that. It's emergent and it's uncovered together. And
Yeah, I'd love, by the way, anyone that has questions or to jump in
yeah,
anytime.
Yeah, if I may, now that you say this, by the way, Isaac, thank you so much. This is the second time I listen to you, and I love your, groundedness and humility, and it's rare to hear an expert that says like, "We'll see," and that makes me respect you much more. Um, on this idea that community is a group of people that actually need each other, and seeing that the marketing teams are pushing the community, it's at the forefront of communications. Like, how do you reconcile those, like two things? Because to me they seem to be two different things. That promise of community, and I've seen so many examples where people buy into that idea and then
Mhm.
they feel kind of like disappointed because they didn't get that. And how do you reconcile that marketing strategy that is so sexy with the, like the understanding that
Yeah.
true community comes from a bunch of people that actually need each other?
Yeah. I mean, I don't reconcile it because I'm not on the marketing team. And if I was, like, some of our marketing might look different. Um, there's also, I mean, that opens up, to be honest, like there's a huge can of worms just, and this is like maybe a whole different topic to go into on another session, Ed, but like, there's at ESM, for example, there's a development company that's taken on significant risk and, invested like significant resources into developing this thing. Um, and like it's a company, right? And in my experience, this isn't like, a max extraction, like let's get every dollar out, but it's certainly like getting compensated for the risk and work that they're taking, right? They got to sell lots. Like, there's no shame in that. You got to sell lots, like that's your business. Um, and like it's a community, and it's a community project. And how do we involve neighbors in decisions about things? And how do we, it's like, how do we really cultivate this community from the very beginning? And how do we like send the right bat signal in our marketing so that we're not like, hey, this is the Instagram version of like potlucks and free range kids and permaculture, off-grid living. And, really what it's about is get your dog off my lawn and, 1,000 WhatsApp groups of like, can someone open the gate? Like all these things. How do you like, um, that like another one, I'm glad I get props for saying I don't know, because I don't know how to square those things. In some levels, you kind of have to trust the people. There's several neighbors here that bought like sight unseen. They're just like, that's what I want, I'm in. And I know for sure in any project, especially in Costa Rica, but I'd say anywhere, there's going to be some percentage of folks that get here and go all in, and then they're like, oh shit, it's not what I thought. It's too hot. This community I thought would be like this, but it's like this. Oh, it's, no one comes to the potlucks. Everyone's like, whatever it is. And so on some level, I also feel like, and then I'll sort of stop rambling, but I also feel like it's kind of the same with any product. It's like you showed me this amazing ad that appealed to like my highest sort of hopes, and I bought it. Like, and now it's your fault that it's not what I thought.
Mm.
Or it's like, and what I really try to tell everybody is like, you cannot buy paradise. You have to build it. And like no
Mm.
one can't buy into a community. You can buy a lot in this container, but like the company is going to be gone. Like in the grand scheme of things, like incredibly quickly. It's like the company is like the spark that gets this little thing going, but like it's totally on us. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges and like Aikido moves for a community to do, especially one like ours. And like a lot of these projects, they're sort of like built by a developer and then kind of handed over to the community, is like, how does the community grow up from instead being like, the company kind of takes care of everything and all their communications are with the company and the company's giving updates on everything. I'm an employee right now of the company. Um, and it turns out pretty rare for a company to even give any thought to starting to build the social and invisible infrastructure. But then the company's gone, and it's sort of like, now we're on our own, and there's no one left to sort of blame when, something's not going right, or, the company said it would be like this, and it's like it's not, and like, but it can be. But again, like, do you really want to put the work in? Are you really ready to kind of grow and stretch in the different ways that are required?
And Zach,
Zach, oh, sorry.
sorry, just to double click on one thing you said, because I think it's super important that most people don't realize, and you mentioned it, is in all these projects, you said the company disappears. And what I like didn't realize, but then realized very quickly is, yeah, like even in the very first Ecovilla or any of these projects, a company started, it sells all the lots. That company, maybe the founder owns a lot and he lives or she lives in the community, but then it's a community. They manage their HOA, they vote on their bylaws, like any Costa Rican, non eco village or not, it's a condominium. And again, the ownership could own one or two lots in that. It's not, but they are just like anyone after that. They go out of God mode and there is no company for grievance.
Right.
Call and be like, hey, customer service, like community is not what I thought. So that's an important factor, I think, that people don't understand always.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to double click that. Yeah, sorry, Grab, go ahead.
Yeah, Zach, and so if you were in charge of the marketing team at the moment, what would you think would be like a more responsible way to market the product in a way that it's true to the authentic, you know, um, goals of the project,
Mm-hmm.
but also, being a bit more sober and not, doing these big promises. Like, what do you think would be the essence of your marketing messaging?
I mean, for me, and this is, talking to a lot of neighbors that are taking part of this project, I think there's like, I don't know if this is good marketing. We'd probably see what it does to the funnel, but I think that there is like a huge number of people globally who are like, it's very clear that like default society or whatever, like the sort of way of doing things, standard operating, whatever, like this isn't working, right? Like you can tell that most institutions in most places are pretty broken, whether it's, government or education or, the economics or whatever, it's just people are kind of like, it's obvious, right, from both ecological and economic indicators that like if we keep going, there's pain ahead. And so people are looking for like they're kind of in this is again what Charles Eisenstein calls like the space between stories, where they want to reject this sort of like default life that they know isn't really satisfying, but there is no clear thing to step into, right? Once you say like, I don't want to work 60 hours a week and drive an hour a day and like spend all my money just to put my kids in daycare and like, what are we doing?